What the gatekeepers in the App Store ecosystem have done is they have deemed everything else scary and everything else unsafe. It's a psychology of defaults.
What does the landscape really of the app ecosystem look like in India?
Seems like we are shoppers, but we are not the shopkeepers in this market. The ecosystem is locked. I think we need to change that.
I think that's really what is the important part of this conversation also today. Hello and welcome to this very special series, Redefining the App Economy for Bharat. And today we have with us an extremely special guest who is going to help us navigate India's path towards a truly open app economy. We've got the perfect guest really for it today. We have Priya Narasimhan, who is the Chief Business Officer, Indus Appstore, a PhonePe subsidiary. Priya is someone who's going to give us an insider perspective, of course, on the Indian apps ecosystem. And also Priya and the very bustling team here are helping to build an alternative app store, which of course gives developers much more freedom and leverage, and also users a lot more choice and access. Priya, thank you so very much for being with us here today. It's wonderful to be, like I said, in this really bustling, energetic office here in Bengaluru. So I'm going to start very simple, Priya.
Sure.
I know that you're an expert, obviously, like I said, but we want to also keep this simple for our viewers to understand, because there is a lot of jargon, there is a lot of technical details one has to understand from this. So to start very simple, what is the kind of size and scale that we're looking at when it comes to the Indian app ecosystem?
I think the scale is staggering. In terms of numbers, people like you and me actually download 142 billion apps in a year, and that's a last year's number, and spend about $167 billion in the app economy. However, the kicker being most of it is actually spent in China, US, or Japan, not in India. Now, bringing it closer to home, India is the world's #1 in terms of the apps downloaded, which is at a 25 billion plus number. We also are people who spend the maximum number of hours on apps globally. But however, if you just dig a little bit deeper, I think seems like we are shoppers, so we consume, but we are not the shopkeepers in this market. So if you look at the developer side, only 3 to 5% of the active developers are actually Indian. I think we need to change that. Also today, if you look at India, 65 to 70% of the top 2,000 apps that all of us download are actually foreign players. That is something which we need to build to change. In terms of revenue, while it may sound modest compared to the 167 billion I spoke about, last year we crossed about 3.5 billion, and it's growing rapidly. So there's lots happening, lots of growth.
Absolutely. So thank you for giving that perspective globally as well. I think it's important for our viewers to understand that. And you said that we are the shoppers and not the shopkeepers. I think that's an important segue into the next thing, which is basically, what does the landscape really of the app ecosystem look like in India? Is it just a few, I think you already touched on that, but is it just a few bigger players who are sort of dominating this space? Is there room actually for smaller developers to make a mark? And I think that's really what is the important part of this conversation also today, if you could elaborate.
If you look at the global app ecosystem, not just India, there are two large players, which is Google with Google Play and Apple with the App Store. They control 95% of all the downloads globally. So that's the fact. Having said that, so can others play easily? Not really. The ecosystem is locked. It's like a house with the doors are locked. Thanks to the bundling which exists in the ecosystem, and when I say bundling, Google, the OS, the Android ecosystem with Google Play, and that is the largest in India, so maybe I'll use that as an example. Because of the bundling, Google Play is by default on most of our phones. It also has system permissions on the device, and they have global handshakes with all the mobile manufacturers. So they are always in the front screen of all the mobile phones. What that means is they have full access, whereas another player for this ecosystem, and that could be Indus or anybody else, if we have to enter, it is closed. So how do we enter? Let's say I go to a website, and that process is called side loading, where a user actually will figure out, hey, I want to download Indus App Store. I go download it, it'll show really scary pop-ups, red in a lot of cases, saying that, hey, this may not be a safe source.
Not intimidating at all.
Not intimidating at all, just a psychological trick.
Of course,
And even after doing all that, you don't have the system permissions to operate. So what that means is that the user, you scare off the user, how will others come in and why will they innovate in the space which is so close? One route some people may say is you pay a lot of money to the OEMs, very expensive proposition. We have done it, a bit of it, but it's prohibitive. One thing in the offing, and I have to call that out, is Google has come up with something called the registered app stores. We'll have to see how it plays out. Really hoping it actually helps opening up the ecosystem.
Absolutely. So I think Priya has touched upon a lot of terms which may sound intimidating to people who don't know technical jargon, whether it's site bundling, whether it's registered app stores. Don't worry, we're going to break those down a little bit later in the conversation. But Priya, like what you said, you gave like a great analogy. It's like a house with like locked doors, and so basically how do you get in? And it's like it's a closed ecosystem. So I'm just wondering, for users who are actually listening to this conversation, what does that actually mean in practice? What does it mean in practice for a user? What does it mean for who does it really affect the most? Who feels the pinch of this the most? If you could tell us that.
So I think everyone does. So I'll start with the developer first. So from a developer perspective, if it's a monopoly, which is mostly India, you have to pay to play. So if it is a pay to play market, then the big fish with lots of dollars, they are the ones likely to win, and you can see that in the data as well. They are the ones who are likely to win. The smaller guys and people who are building the MSMEs, that belt actually will get crushed in this ecosystem. Then let's come to the consumers. Consumers, I mean, there is no choice. They've just stuck to the default. What it means, which they don't understand probably, is that the cost of a pay-to-play market on the other side does pass on to them. So you're actually probably paying higher prices because of the cost passed on, but you don't realize it, and you don't have any of the other option either. One other, I think, slightly more macro perspective, I think from an India perspective, if you think about it, app ecosystem is one of the biggest entry points to the mobile ecosystem. And if that we are net importers, like I said, we are consuming more than creating, digital sovereignty is also in question. It's like, are we dependent on a few large guys in this ecosystem? So I think there is a need to actually also think about that and see if we can change that from a sovereignty perspective.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you touched on digital sovereignty, and a lot of people again may not know exactly what that entails. The average person watching that why is that particularly important at this juncture in India's growth story also, and especially when we're coming to the app ecosystem? If you could explain it to us in a simple way, why is that important?
So it's so let's say, like, I'll take it from a developer perspective maybe. Today, their lives are controlled by these two large ecosystems, Google and Apple, because that's the only distribution play. And it's a vicious circle, right? This is the platform where you spend money to play. This is the platform which generates revenue. Then again, you have to plow it back. So anything this ecosystem does to you impacts you. You can't run away from it, right? You're stuck. You're in the loop, essentially. And what that means is, if this is controlled by two global private entities, which are not even from India, and they are controlling the destiny, or rather mobile phones, of Indian users. If, for example, the US or somebody decides to put sanctions on India, I mean, in today's world where wars are common, it's not something which could be, it's not a surprise, it could happen. What happens? Does everything stop working? Is the user not able to access all the goods and services that he's used to today? Does that come to a standstill?
So essentially, that's good. You've given us a great perspective on why digital sovereignty, especially I think all of us can agree in today's day and world, why sovereignty is important in this particular area. And of course, also going forward, this, I think essentially what I'm getting, what I'm understanding from this is that users, no one should be telling India what they should be choosing, So isn't it obvious then in that case, or shouldn't it be obvious, or what are you finding about this, that why wouldn't users then want to actually go to an alternative app store? What is actually stopping them from doing that? What have you noticed really?
It's a psychology of defaults, right? So when you get a phone, when a user gets a phone, Google Play in India's context is default largely. It owns most of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So you naturally start using that. You've built a habit over 20 years.
Yeah.
That's default for you. The user never got the choice in the first place. So it's very hard to move away from defaults. For a product to win, it's best that the user gets the choice and the user decides. And I'll give an example from the Indus ecosystem. So when we started, like most apps, we had a language screen and we chose pre-selected English. Users just moved ahead. I don't think even me as a user thought about, acha, you know, let's move forward. They've chosen English, but they did not find things that were relevant. Retention was low.
Okay.
We said, let's give the user the choice. Let's not pre-select. We realized 45-50% of the users actually did not choose English.
Okay.
They choose something else. The retention goes up, the download goes up. So here we are putting the control back in the users, but the moment there's a default, it's very hard to change behavior. I mean, so I think that's sort of, it's very hard for the user to on his own, you know, come and change. And in this particular ecosystem, there are more barriers than default.
Yeah. And talking about the barriers, you know, I think a lot of, I'm just guessing here, but you know, in the sense, users make choices only when they feel fully informed maybe. You know, sometimes they feel a lot of this is maybe too technical for them to understand. So that's where I wanted to come to you actually. We mentioned earlier that like kind of explaining certain terms, you know, and talking about a term which is intimidating is scary screen basically. So what does scary screen mean? Like in terms of, is it like when I try to download an app which is not from the official app store and you know, my phone starts going crazy essentially, you know, is that what it means? If you could break it down very simply for us, what does scary screen mean? How is it tied to really technical bundling? Is it a tool to actually enable that? If you could explain that to us.
So I'll give you a very simple analogy, nothing to do with the app ecosystem. So let's say kid goes to school and there is an official canteen in school which is tied to your student ID and the school has a tie-up. Now there is a great new food place which is opened outside just opposite which has better food and lower prices. But if the school issues you a note saying that, that you know, anything which is outside may cause stomach infections, please proceed at your own risk. The moment you get that, it is but natural that you know you will gravitate and only stick to the official canteen in school and not go to the other school, despite it being pricier and maybe poorer quality. So you just have to gravitate. So it's exactly that. What the gatekeepers in the App Store ecosystem have done is they have, without actually having any standards tested, deemed everything else scary and everything else unsafe. So that is the sort of barrier for choice. And then at a consumer level, I mean, if that red screen comes 10 times to convince the billion people in India, I don't think it's a tall ask.
Yeah, it's a tall ask. And if you could explain also technical bundling in this, you know, you gave us a great analogy and I think a lot of people will be able to figure that out. But what is technical bundling? If you could explain why that is also something which is used also to sort of keep people, maintain those barriers like you were saying.
So the technical bundling is what is leading to these scary screens. In the same analogy, the school is the operating system, which is Android in this Google case, and the canteen is Google Play. So they are bundled together and they say that they only operate best together. They have all the permissions. They have the right to operate with all the permissions and no questions asked, and they have been deemed safe. That is technical bundling. If, however, I were to separate the two, let's say Google Play did not get any special permissions like any other app store in the market, or it was not already preloaded on all devices, then the user can decide. Then there are many more options probably in the market.
Absolutely. Well, you've certainly given us an appetite to discover more, I have to say. So, and going forward also we hear a lot of other terminologies like interoperability, data portability. Now, all these sound, very spacey to a lot of people basically. So, what does that actually mean? Is interoperability just a fancy way of saying apps should talk to each other? Is data portability just a fancy way of saying your data should be moving with you where you go? I'm sure you will explain it much better, but is that what it essentially is?
So data portability is, again, let me give you a money example. If you had money in one bank and you're the loyal customer, but for some reason you want to move, you will just pull out all your money and go to a second bank. That is the same thing in data. Let's say you are interacting or a customer of a particular ecosystem, let's say Google and Google Play. You should have the option to actually say, hey, I think this is a better product for me, product B, and I say that you please cease to use my data, and that is you will actually delete all the data, and I can operate with the other ecosystem B. So that is essentially data portability. It is basis consumer choice that he should be able to port it to wherever he wants. Just because I have operated with Google Play does not mean that all the data belongs there and it resides there. I should have the option to move it. So that's portability. Interoperability is, I think, more easily understood. It's like cards, right? You have a RuPay card or a Visa card. It works on every machine, whether it is Spine Labs or things. So in the app context, for example, today when developer uploads an APK, usually that APK is built for the Google ecosystem. If he puts the same APK on another ecosystem, it may not work or it will throw warnings. So that means it is not, from a developer perspective, he doesn't care where distribution comes from, right? It has to be open. It should be, the app should be operate well on a device. Doesn't matter what is the distribution source. So that is what we mean by app should be interoperable, and every app should work across all distribution sources.
Absolutely. And you brought up earlier, I think right at the beginning of the conversation, about registered apps and whether we'll have to wait and watch in terms of how successful it is, so to speak. So what are registered apps? How is it different from side loading? If you could give us that perspective.
So side loading, I'll give you an analogy, which is the world we operate in today. So it's like, if I have to make it very simple, it's like if you're walking through a dark alley, it's risky, it's complicated, you're unsure, you may get scared and you may just walk back, right? That's the side alley. With registered app stores coming in, it's like putting street lights on that street. So we're not changing that route. You're just legitimizing that route, saying that, hey, now these app stores are legitimate and registered, and now can be accessed from the side alley, which is side loading, essentially.
Okay.
So that's what it essentially means. We don't know how it will play out. We don't know how the requirements are. We don't know what other hurdles there will be. But hoping for the best that will open up the ecosystem.
Talking about hurdles, I think in all of this we've kind of touched upon the users and things like that. So what would you say in this current scenario? What is the biggest hurdle really for developers? I think a lot of average folks, a lot of users don't really give this a second thought, very honestly. They just assume that, okay, app platforms are, meritorious, so to speak, that if your app is good, it will get discovered. Is that truly the case, or what kind of struggles do developers and challenges do they face in the current ecosystem?
Sure. Of course, the app quality is important, and the app should have figured out a flywheel for its own product. Those are, basic. But that's not enough. Discovery has to be engineered. It doesn't come just because you have a great product. It takes visibility through the distribution, which is again coming back to pay to play. How do you get that visibility is essentially by paying for the ads to make sure you come up on top. which again means that you may have the best product, but you may fail before you reach critical mass if you don't have the money power to actually push it along. So that's the irony of it, but which is the reason there are 75% of the top 2,000 is actually foreign today. Also, if you see, while there are millions of apps registered on both Google Play and App Store, the percentage of downloads actually comes, I think 60-70% comes from the top 2,000. So it's a huge skew.
So is that why, I mean, one could put it very simplistically, is that why, good apps which have a lot to offer, which are useful, which seem to be, have it all in place, is that why you would say some of them fail?
Yeah, so definitely I think if you don't have the money power to get discovered, or you have something unique which you enable discovery outside, or commissions. I think commissions is another reason which, even with a great product, it might render the business model unviable because you're not able to make money because somebody else is taking a large share of the P&L. So even at that leg, sometimes it breaks down. Also, unfortunately, the big fish problem remains. A lot of the large guys actually have preferential deals, and they have visibility which is much higher than some of the others. These are the challenges. Not unsurmountable, but these are the challenges in the ecosystem.
Absolutely, and of course the challenges which you are, taking head on at the moment as well. And like I said, a lot of people have this sort of, image that okay, this is all about what app is good, what app is useful, and therefore they will be successful. Would you say that's one of the biggest myths in this ecosystem, or what is personally a myth that you want dispelled, like the top of your list essentially?
One is that people believe developers also have a choice. Like consumers may have the default problem, but developers, if they don't like the 30%, they should move. Not true. If 90% of the global downloads are happening through just 2 sources, if you leave that ecosystem, it's business suicide. So they don't have a choice. They have to be in the ecosystem, essentially.
Tell us a little bit about also some of the behind the scenes, like what do these negotiations actually look like behind the scenes in terms of, with developers and, these platforms, who really holds, I mean, I think you've touched on it, but if you could go into further detail, who really holds the upper hand in this situation? What are these negotiations really like? How do they actually take place in terms of the visibility, in terms of the commercial terms, in terms of featuring? If you could tell us a little bit about how those things actually play out.
So I think, like I said, spend plays a large part in enabling discovery in the app ecosystem today. And I think these negotiations are not one-way contracts on one particular item. Usually it's a combination of visibility, how much commission somebody gets. So for example, a developer A, while on the face of it is supposed to pay 30%, but may have a side deal where he's not even paying 10% potentially. That could be a deal basis how else. Maybe he's spending a lot on the ad ecosystem. So it's not a one size fits all, but there are contours of it. But to strike these deals, you are a large player typically with that muscle, and your business is already large enough, and then you just keep scaling, and then you kill the lower players.
So basically, they're the ones who ultimately end up losing out in the system.
The smaller guys lose out. The larger guys have the money, so they continue to stay, and they are the ones who will keep growing. And this equation of top 2,000 versus the millions will never change.
Absolutely. And coming back to the users as well, is the ecosystem currently, I think I read somewhere that it's sort of similar to like a shopping mall, and there are only a few shops that the users can see. They don't know about the rest of the things available really, so their focus is sort of narrowed. Is that a fair way to assess it, would you say? Or?
Yes. So I mean, it's a typical, like you said, it's a typical store or a shopping mall, and you get attracted to the things you see. You're not going to pull out everything which is in the, in the go down or, in the back room. So if it is not displayed, you're not going to spend hours and figure out, oh, maybe I want this, maybe I want that. You will pick what is there. The few pages which are the most interactions with the customer, if that is going to be flooded with people who spend the most, the ability to discover something is going to be less. And I'll give you a very more simple analogy. Let's say my mother, like she reads and writes Tamil, for example. And she was looking for a festival, like, there is that doll festival, Golu, it's called, right, where they set it up. She wanted to find those dolls, right? But she didn't know how. Typically Google is the first. I told her to try Indus. She realized that during that period, when she switched to Tamil as a language, actually some of those things popped up because they were relevant to her or to in that region. So she discovered something new which she would not have discovered at all. So I think if you enable discovery basis personal preferences, I think a lot more developers will actually benefit, and the consumers, of course, have a greater choice and will find things they probably need.
Absolutely. And you talked about enabling discovery, but I think a lot of this conversation is also about enabling innovation as well.
Yeah.
Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. Like just in the App Store ecosystem, because the consumers are not going to adopt because we've been scaring them away. There are no innovators who are building app stores, for example, because nobody believes it's a viable business. That itself is one. Same thing on the developer side. I mean, thanks to AI, the number of apps popping up on a daily basis, whether it's a college kid or a top guy, is many. But do each of them actually, maybe so many good apps are failing because they're not able to get that next impetus. Because you need to also flow back, you need a certain scale for you to actually further innovate and also bring many more people into the fold. Essentially. If you know you can succeed, and if you know that you're not wedded to one and you can have a multi-tiered, let's say, distribution approach without the risk of retaliation or without saying, hey, my visibility will be impacted, you will try a lot more things. Just, I think, basics, principles of competition. If there is no competition and there is monopoly, it stifles innovation. If it is open, each one tries something else to be better, and we'll probably see a lot better products in the market.
So Priya, from what I'm understanding, what you're describing the ecosystem as, it's sort of like a house with locked doors. It's a closed ecosystem. How does one move beyond it being, because that's what this topic is all about, India moving towards a more open app ecosystem. What's really required to change that, would you say?
One is regulation, and today we don't have any regulations for this space. So what I mean by regulation is a standardized framework for security and compliance for the ecosystem, and that should be determined by what we need for safety for our consumers, our developers. So it should be guided by what India wants. It should ideally not be guided by what private players' policy dictates. So that's one. I think it'll just streamline the ecosystem. Second is the technology unbundling, which we kept talking about throughout. We need to decouple the OS from the Play Store or App Store in this case. What that does is gives a level playing field and a neutral technical platform for more app stores to come in, and that will further lead to innovation. I think that is important.
Priya, I think you've dispelled a lot of myths for us, even with this conversation. But I'm just going to get into a few more right now. There may be things we've already covered in bits and bobs here and there, but I'd like to get your overall perspective because we have a Mythbuster segment now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a statement, and you can tell us whether it's a myth or a fact. So are you ready to be the Mythbuster at the moment?
Sounds fun.
All right, let's go for it. The first myth or fact, I'm going to give you a sentence first. So the reason what we were just talking about, the competition and the monopoly that exists, or duopoly if you want to call it that, the reason Google and Apple dominate is simply because they were the first ones to actually build an app store. Myth or fact?
Myth. They were the first ones, and I have to give it to them. They built a great ecosystem, but it's because of the bundling of the OS and the app stores, which is why they are able to maintain the dominant position. If they had opened it up and decoupled, many more app stores would have existed.
Another one that I think we'll probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you, myth or fact, consumers aren't really worried about how app stores use their data. They just want the apps.
myth. I think
Yeah, I think we all know
in today's
that.
day and age,
Where
I think,
consumers are pretty
and we actually did
informed.
do a survey of our customer base, and of the survey base, 70% said they were very worried. I don't know where my data goes. I don't know who uses them. I don't know what's happening to them. So people are scared. People are scared.
So we have clarity on that as well. And I think we did touch upon this, but I feel like it's important to
Sure.
go over it again. If a developer feels an App Store's commission, 30% commission is too high, it's pretty easy for them to move across to an equally popular alternative App Store.
Two myths there.
2 myths, all right.
So there is no equally popular app store,
Yeah, correct.
third app store.
I kind of gave it away with that one only. Yeah.
So I'll bust that one
Yeah.
first. And the second one, of course, if they control most of the downloads globally, not just in India, you cannot be out of it if you want to build a business. You need distribution, you need discovery, you have to partner with them. The business side of your product will not allow you to stay out of the ecosystem.
All right, fair enough. And yeah, I think you've busted some of those myths very well, Priya. Thank you so much for that. And I think it's important to get, I think even if the answers are pretty obvious to us, I think it's important that you kind of fleshed it out essentially. So that brings me to my final question now. I think we've got an idea of, the ecosystem, the size of it, the kind of landscape, who actually has the upper hand as of the moment at any rate, what users are sort of missing out on in the current ecosystem, the challenges that developers have as well. So going forward, what is your vision for the Indus App Store? What is your vision for the app ecosystem as a whole? Where do you want to see it going?
So I'll start with the app ecosystem first. I think for me it's fair competition. It's about opening the ecosystem so that the best player wins. To that end, I think a couple of things we need. I think something on the regulation in India so that India determines what is safe and not a private entity. A technology unbundling. And a change in mindset. I think we need to become creators and builders and not just consumers so that we can innovate more as this ecosystem opens up. Also, what that will enable, and that's the ultimate vision as an app store as a platform, is it gives developers enough opportunity to get discovered so they have a fair shot at winning, and offer consumers a true choice, a real alternative, a real third, fourth, fifth app store, hopefully. That's the ecosystem vision. For Indus, I think for us, it's about becoming a trusted destination for digital goods and services, not including apps where we play today, so that consumers have a real choice and developers can grow and monetize.
Thanks so much for that, Priya. It's been an absolute delight having you on the show today. And I think after that conversation, it is very clear that an open and innovative app ecosystem is indeed possible once we get over, of course, the challenges that developers face and, of course, platform dominance, which we touched upon a lot in this conversation. And we are going to have many more insightful conversations like this on this special series, which is Redefining the App Economy for Bharat. And we hope that you, our dear viewers, will be tuned in for the next episodes as well. Thank you so much for joining us today.